Hi everyone, I want to give you some quick tips and info about playing Diablo 2 and what you need to know when you start out for the first time, or maybe it has been a long time for you and you want to get a bit of a refresher. The game is very old and hasn't received a lot of updates for a long time, so stuff is really out of balance and you should just understand a bit of the clunkiness and the mechanics to be able to complete it and have a smooth journey. So first of all, you start with creating your character. So I can say that especially melee classes and gear dependent classes are typically not really easy to start with. So you should, for example, probably avoid Barbarian unless you are more experienced. Same goes for like any kind of melee paladin or melee even Amazon and Assassin, although they have it a bit easier. And typically caster classes are more beginner friendly because casters don't really need any items. They scale their damage with mostly the skill level and not really any of their weapons or anything like that. So once you have chosen which one to pick, you just make a character, enter the game. In Diablo 2 you have to create and join games. So there's a button here, you can create a game and you give a password. And then you go. You will also find a lot of games that have especially like trade offers or like certain descriptions of what they're gonna do in that run. So there might be like, especially in endgame, bar runs, chaos sanctuary runs, all kinds of farming going on, or just trading games where people will offer this item and search for that item, and you'll see a lot of that as well. So here you make the game, then anyone who has the game name and the password can join if you set a password, and you are in town. Obviously this is the old game here, this is not Diablo 2 Resurrected yet, because that's gonna release in a few hours, so I am not on the new game yet. But essentially everything is the same, just looks a bit different. So first things first, you have to decide on the build to play. The skill trees are very simple in this game, so essentially you start from the top, you go to the bottom. There is certain requirements for some skills with the arrows. Yeah, you can see what you need to do. There's also skill synergies. So for example, you can see that on some skills where here on the bottom it says Bone Wall receives bonuses from, and then usually have like some kind of scaling amount that comes from putting skill points into the other skills that are listed. So this is usually how you make a powerful build in the end game. So typically you want to make sure that you don't spread out your skill points randomly in all the skills. You don't get that many points. You can put up to 20 in each skill, and then you can increase that number with plus bonus to skill levels. There's charms, there's items, there is especially for caster classes you have, for example, a wand for a necromancer that can give you skill bonuses. So this stuff exists and can boost it way beyond 20. Now this game has 5 different acts. You start in Act 1, there's 6 quests in each act besides Act 4, which has only 3. And typically there are some optional quests and some main quests. You basically just follow them. When you go through the zones, usually, at least in the start of the game, you have some kind of like road to follow, or you just walk out here, and then typically you have some side caves and areas that you don't really have to do unless a quest sends you there. But usually you can find the exit to the next zone by just either following the path, or if there's no path, you can go around the edges of the zone to try to find the next. There are also waypoints that give you like a shortcut to go to a different area, so you don't have to run all the way back to town. There's also town portals, which you can just use directly from your inventory. And speaking of inventory, there's also potion management, which is very important in this game. So at a vendor in town, so in Act 1 this is Akara, you can buy health and mana potions. You can also buy something like stamina potions. They're not bad early on because you have a limited duration you can run, and then you will be slower for a time until it fills up again. So maybe you want to get some of those early on. There's also those tomes of town portal. They are quite useful because they can stack up to 20, and then you just have one of those in the inventory. You right click for opening a portal, and then you can go back and forth between town and outside of town. So here I just swapped to one of my other characters that I have used for a practice run recently. For example, you can see here that with a belt you get more slots, so we can give up to 4 of those rows here, and fill up the potions quite easily by just shift clicking. So if I use a couple of those potions and then shift click on this mana potion with right click, then it will fill up all of those that are the same type of potion. So this is pretty neat to kind of quickly get more, and then you want to spend more gold, and essentially you want to rock out of town with more mana potions in your pocket and potentially health potions, depending on the build a bit, because it might be a good idea to invest a lot in more mana, but typically you just chuck mana potions all the time. Speaking of that, we have the stats here. So when you level up, you get +5 stat attributes and you can spend them freely. Typically you spend basically nothing in dexterity unless you are some like assassin or Amazon that needs that for certain like bow or claw requirements. You put a little bit into strength just to be able to wear the gear, because gear has like a strength requirement. So for example, I have 34, so I can wear this shield, and everything else almost goes to vitality. So this is usually how it works. Maybe as like a caster you can put a little bit into energy. I also put I think 3 or 4 level ups here as this Amazon, but typically you just get extra life and extra mana from level ups, and you don't want to waste your points on energy to get more mana, because usually you will have enough later on. So vitality is really where it's at. This is where we'll usually spend most of the points. In general, you can find a lot of really diverse loot in this game, especially the unique items and the rune words are very special. Rare items can have all kinds of different stats, so there's no like primary stats, secondary stats. There's like almost no real system. There's only the prefixes and suffixes that rolls for blue and yellow items. That's about it. So nothing too crazy and really random, and you don't necessarily need a lot of really good loot to actually beat the game. So just to show you what I have in on this character that has completed Hellbal. This was in an 8-man party, not solo. Obviously this gear is really bad. I just have like a bunch of resists, really like almost starter gear basically, aside from this. So this is one of those rune birds. If you don't know how those work, essentially you need a white or gray item with open sockets, and then you need to put the right runes in the right order into that item, and it will create a special like unique item essentially. And this is one of those. There's like a very common one, Ral or Tal in a shield, and this is very useful to get a lot of resists. You can get all 3 of those runes in Act 5 from a quest, and then when you're a class that wears a shield, this is typically the way to go for early on. Now the question is, with all this loot, what is really worth picking up? So early on you just want to try to get like basically something in every slot. So whenever you find like blue or yellow items early on, you definitely want to go check them out. You need to use the scroll of identification, or you can also talk to Deckard Cain to identify stuff for you once you have saved them. There's also certain like base types in the game that are worth a lot. Typically these are caster weapons or offense, and stuff that has +2 skills. So for example, here's a staff, and here's a wand, there's scepters. So all the stuff is usually worth a lot when it rolls some skill bonuses. You just pick it up and you winter it. So whenever you find something like this, also later on you're gonna find like heavy plate mails and this kind of stuff. So just any kind of heavy body armors are typically worth a lot. Early on you have stuff like throwing knives, throwing axes, you have like some strangling potions. They're usually like some small little things you can pick up. You have stuff like rubies and emeralds. So some of them you might want to save for your use, but if you don't, you need them, you can vendor them as well. And this is basically how you get the gold to buy all these potions, because you're gonna be doing that quite a lot. Now when you're out in the world and fighting, you want to make sure that you especially prioritize all the elite packs and champion packs. So you're gonna find basically similar to Diablo 3, you have blue packs and you have yellow packs with minions, and you always want to go for those and not really farm too much of like the trash monsters. It's fine to kill like large packs, but most classes don't really have like crazy AoE abilities, especially early on. So you mostly focus on the elites because they give a lot of the loot and a lot of XP, and it's really worth doing those compared to pretty much anything else. Depending on whether you play on PC or on console, you'll have a skill system that looks like this. So essentially you can assign one skill on left click and one on right click. On console you actually have like a bar where you can just like press the buttons and assign a skill on each of those. But for most people, I guess it will look like this. So you just have the selection of all skills that are available to you, and you can also assign hotkeys. For example, here's F1, F2, F3, and then you swap between them. You don't actually use those hotkeys by pressing the button, but you swap between the skills, and then you can use different abilities like this. When you die, you will leave behind your corpse, so this is quite important. You have to pick up your items again. So when you die, first of all, and after Nightmare and in Hell, you will also lose XP, you will lose the gold that you carry with you, and also some from your stash in the case of online games. And then you spawn back with no items. And all the others are in your corpse, so you have to go and get it again. And if you do that, you also get some of the XP back. You lose 10% when you die, and I think you gain 7.5% back when you recover your corpse. And if you can't recover it because it's too dangerous, you have to leave the game and you will be in town, but you don't get the XP back. So this is the penalty for getting the easy way out, so to say. So here you can just like go back to where it shows on the map and then pick it up basically, if you're a bit careful. And here you see that I got some of the XP again. If you are unhappy with your build, or your build guide might even recommend you to respec at a certain time, then you do this in Act 1. Essentially, the first quest in the game gives you a free respec, which resets your attributes and your skill points. And you do this at Akara, who will have a button here to respec. And there's also a way in very late game to farm up more respecs, but for the most part you will have 3 of them, 1 from each difficulty playthrough, and you have to use them like with thought. Also quite important in this game are mercenaries. So in almost every act you will have one of these NPCs that can give you a mercenary from that act. So for example in Act 1 this is like one of these rangers, in Act 2 there's like some melee guy, in Act 3 this is some caster, in Act 5 is some barbarian, and they can help you out a lot. You can also gear them up, so you can give them items, not the same as you have, so there's no rings and stuff, but you can also boost them quite a lot to the point where they actually contribute significant amounts of damage, and also potentially help you out with some buffs and debuffs and auras and these kind of things. You can heal them by either dragging a potion on them, or you can also shift and then, for example, a health potion to them from your belt. This helps out a lot to make them survive, and in case they die, just go back to the NPC and revive them, but this will cost quite some gold. Now I did mention the different difficulties, so essentially what happens is that you play through the 5 acts, and once you have completed each act you go to the next, and then after Act 5 when you kill Baal you will return back to Act 1 on the next difficulty, and this goes on for 3 difficulties. So there's normal, nightmare and hell is like the end game difficulty, so to say, and everything becomes harder with more damage, more health values on the monsters. And obviously you have other penalties as well, like you lose some resistances. So for example, if I take off my shield here, you can see I have like -20 res everywhere, so you lose some resistance for every difficulty. You have increasing like monster affixes, elite affixes. You have even some like random elites and random monsters coming in certain zones to make it harder. And also there's immunities, so you can actually find enemies that are completely immune to certain damage types. So you'll see this a lot in Hell, even double immunities where you can't deal any lightning or fire damage. There are ways to break immunities, but for the most part, if you have a build that is focused on only one damage type, you will essentially not kill certain enemies, or you have to make sure that you have some other backup skill that can actually deal with some immunities. And lastly, we have the cube. So this is the Horadric Cube. You will find this in Act 2, and this is where a lot of quest items are like produced that you will need in later acts, but also you can use this for crafting. So you can, for example, upgrade runes and gems. For example, if you put 3 times the same flawless ruby here, you'll make it a perfect ruby. And if you put 3 times the same rune, for example, 3 Tal runes will upgrade into a Ral rune, and then 3 Ral runes will upgrade into an Odd rune, and there's like a kind of like a progression like this. And you can also craft certain things. There's like recipes for rolling certain mods on, like, for example, like a yellow amulet. There's all kinds of stuff that you can make with this cube, and it's definitely worth checking out the recipes for it. And speaking of that, we have the Diablo 2 max roll site here, which has been recently updated with a lot of new tools, a lot of new guides, and has pretty much everything you need to know about the game in all the detail imaginable from some of the best Diablo 2 players out there. So go check that out. Here I just really scratched the surface, and I'll be talking more about Diablo 2. I'll also be making my own guides and these kind of things, because I know that a lot of people also enjoy the video format more. But I can just recommend, go on this website, it's linked in the description, and have a look at a build guide, maybe have a look at a leveling guide, and maybe understand a bit more of the game's mechanics. So these are all the basics to help you get started. And as I said, there's a lot more about this game, a lot of really weird mechanics, clunky stuff, and bugs even, that just make the game what it is. A lot of things to learn about, but starting out and just taking it slow, enjoying the journey, is really the most fun part about it. So I hope this helps you, hope you like this, and I wish you a wonderful time in D2R. See you guys next time.